I said, the known knowns for known knowns, and it's now over to you for questions, which is the unknown unknowns. Your time is here to ask Bruce, Andy, Stuart, Phil, and John any questions that you have. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, one over there.
Hiya, this is a question for Philip about the lion's stone. Did you find it like that, or did you just kind of in the pictures? Or did you kind of just pose it for the pictures?
No, all those pictures were in situ excavation photos. So we had put in a trench across that area to try and understand the relationship between the various levels of cobbling and the walling, because the northern section of the walls had been robbed out. We were dealing with a whole series of robber trenches and deposits and cuts, so we needed a slot through that. So that trench had been targeted to answer those stratigraphic questions, and on a day when the client was on site having a look, one of our excavators was trying to attract my attention that one of those stones was a bit carved. So that area was a bit odd because there were other large boulders that seemed to have been put next to the curve of that stone, and one of them turned out to be that line. But yeah, so it was completely upright. It was sitting on a horizon or surface, so relatively flat. And the two paws next to it were, yeah, I mean, that's exactly where they were. That's just tidied up and then photoed.
Is there any more questions?
Just on the lions again. Are the pictures being archived in Canmore, or where?
So they will go through the treasure trove process, as is normal for planning conditioned excavations. And the treasure trove panel will make an assessment, so the kings and remembrance, or whether to disclaim or keep the artifacts. John, I imagine you want it for the museum? Oh yeah, John will take them.
Thank you. Well, Philip and his team are writing it up as we speak, aren't we, for publication? So they will be published, yet to decide where. And then, as Phil was saying, go through Treasure Trove next year or two, whenever Emily and our team are busy. And we hope we will be claiming them for the City of Edinburgh Council as part of our archaeological collections in due time.
We've got a question over here.
Hello, another question stroke comment for Philip. I'm very interested in the Greater Barnton landscape. The first point is you showed Roy's map, which showed the near rectangular fields in the west part, the Cramond Regis part of the Barnton estate. Can you relate those to the enclosure of Cramond Muir?
Not at the moment. So when did that happen?
I think around 1750.
1750, okay. I mean, one of my working hypotheses is that that landscape was laid out by Lord Ruthven, the first Earl, in which is a bit earlier, 1718, I think.
Yeah, maybe I've got my date wrong. Maybe I'm thinking 1720 and then done by 1750. But
yeah. But that would be an interesting point to link to those landscape changes, definitely. Yeah.
On the question of the later landscape, you mentioned about how the sort of agricultural activities were done away with. When the modern Queensferry Road was completed in 1826, the Great Wall of Barnton was constructed, which enclosed that part of the Barnton estates, and public access was denied to the old roads. The Ramsays, certainly in later generations, were very much involved in fox hunting.
Yes.
And I think they cleared out all the lesser dwellings from
Yes.
within the wall and left it as an open horse riding area.
Right. Yes, thank you. Certainly, yeah. So I've been through some of the archives relating to Cram Regis and the house, and yep, there's mention of that, and they were also laterally were the ones who obviously, who split off the estates and then invited firstly the railway and then of course the golf courses, which I haven't mentioned, which formed, is also the Barton House and Cram Regis policies sort of preserved as the golf courses, right? So that was the final transformation as well. And the island around about Cram Regis was preserved up until the early 20th century when it was finally demolished, and then the suburban housing comes into that land plot. But yeah, there's a lot of changes going on in that landscape, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's changes still going on.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in landscape features associated with Old Barnton House.
Okay, to the east, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how these are being sort of picked away at by housing developments.
Yeah.
So on. John Lawson knows I'm always pestering him about things in the area.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, hopefully it's all recorded now, obviously, through the planning system and watching briefs and so on to the east, yeah.
Thank you.
Stuart, that was fascinating to see that. The arch dinosaur that I am, sceptical about so much geophysics. I'm not really going to ask about that. There are two dimensions to Newstead that interest me particularly. One is that the original geophysics, which I suspect is now lost, suggested there were great long fields going out to the south. And I wondered if you're getting any sense of those coming through from what you've done so far. The other question I just have, yes, I think it's fascinating, the clay pipes, and I wonder if ploughmen, whether they also smoked when they worked. But also, how do you account for these concentrations of post-medieval material? It wasn't all by the village. There were these sort of pockets across the rest of the site.
So, in terms of what's going to the south, hopefully we may be able to retrieve the earlier geophysics, but we're planning to revisit that area in any case. So I'll come back to you on that one. I think those potential linear field systems were coming out from the southern edge of the southern enclosure, so that is to the south of the bypass, so we haven't really been looking at that as yet. But I'll come back to you on that. I've got quite a wide interpretation of what archaeology is, and refuse disposal with the 19th, early 20th century. I'm quite happy with that being within archaeology. And there is an interesting disposal pattern of refuse. I don't really understand it. I can't directly answer the question. There is a focus right down at the corner that's right next to Newstead. So I think proximity, not necessarily purely for domestic refuse, but proximity for refuse disposal there, and it does track a little bit along by the hedge. But I know there are other areas in that landscape that we haven't started formally documenting that are known places to look for interesting artifacts and things. So I think we'll all get more data on that. And yeah, they could be clay pipes of ploughmen, of course. I would much rather do the clay pipes than cars work.
Is there any reason, Stuart, that that's not field manure?
I don't think it's just field manure, because then you'd expect an even distribution of other sorts of refuse. So there does seem to be a degree of selection towards clay pipes. But we may get a better understanding. We're certainly getting a nice understanding of the distribution of metal buttons at the moment from modern periods, they're certainly post-Roman. So there'll be quite a lot that they can add together. I'm quite happy with the idea of we understanding recent refuse disposal as much as Roman archaeology. Cool.
I can add to that slightly. From other sites, what we're finding is the hotspots are where the material was dumped, and it's because it's getting stratified in the back of carts. We think the heavier stuff's gone down to the bottom, and that's where we're hitting the hotspots. The buttons are an interesting one because of the raggings and things like that. So there's a whole, I completely agree with you that that's something that as archaeologists we should be looking at and trying to understand. But there's a whole pattern in there because of the types of material, where it's coming from. Is it coming from Edinburgh? Is it coming from somewhere else? It's quite interesting, but where we've had hotspots before, it seems to be the dump spots, and we do get concentrations of pottery and clay pipe because they seem to be stratified to the bottom or the top, whichever way round it will work, and not moved as far, if that's any use.
Hiya. Could I ask John and Stuart, you've identified a lot of temporary forts near Trimontium. Will you be looking to excavate those at any given time, or are you simply just going to pile together a large sort of corpus of magnetometry and resistivity findings?
There's a good question. There's a difference between planning and hoping, and it falls somewhere in there. The Camp 5, Rick Jones put a trench across that he didn't find a huge, I think there was an amphoray fragment and not much else in there, but there may already be some unpublished data that we can think about trying to access from there. Carol excavated parts of Camp 1, and I don't think there's any particularly detailed record. There were a couple of burials, but I think the bones have completely disappeared. It would be a lovely project. Go in, do some nice dating, OSL sequence.
Can I just add to that? The detail that you saw from the RGK geophysics doesn't give you an idea of exactly what's going on in the ramparts of these temporary camps. And there are a lot of ovens, and we know exactly where they are. And that would be a fantastic target for data. So yes is the answer. We would like to. Whether that will happen or not is a question not yet.
Would it be a community dig or?
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we've had those questions. If we can reconvene at 4 o'clock, we'll have the gallop through the next series of talks from Stephen, Ben, Rob, Stephen and Trevor.